Our next speaker is Dr. Richard Horton, who is the editor-in-chief of The Lancet. Dr. Horton grew up in the UK, went to school in London and Birmingham, and lived in New York for a short time while he was the American editor of The Lancet, returned to become editor-in-chief of The Lancet Group. He's had a very distinguished career, especially in leading The Lancet in reporting on not only important clinical medical advancements, but also then accumulating the knowledge and thinking about what are the policy and programmatic implications of this information. This Global Health 2035 is one of a series of many reports put out by The Lancet on health and policy implications and how we can move forward for the future. He's really taken The Lancet into becoming a very important vehicle for shaping thinking and policy worldwide. So thank you for making the trek here, and it's a pleasure to hear from you, Richard. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Tom, and a real tribute to your leadership for putting this center together, and I know you've done it with the great support of June Washington. My job is to say some of the difficulties and challenges that delivering on the vision of Global Health 2035 is. It was a tough job to put this report together, and Dean really went through hell to do this. It's tough out here, isn't it? I mean, he's 2 hours drive away, apparently. I've come from wet, windy London. Why couldn't the founders of The Lancet have ended up in California? I mean, I kind of feel we lucked out slightly here. When I went into the United Nations General Assembly last September, it's become a fantastic jamboree for global health. This is the sign that was on every desk. MDG success. In the United Nations, you're never allowed to criticize. You're never allowed to ask difficult questions. You're never allowed to point to weaknesses. You're only allowed to say how fantastic everything is. Well, this isn't going to make great progress. You come into a meeting like this, which was a meeting to review progress on the MDGs, and it was quite clear from the very moment you sat down that nobody was allowed to raise a difficult question. So let's raise today some difficult questions about how we're going to deliver on this vision. You've heard about how we want to get this grand convergence on a whole array of issues. Let's take one of those, child mortality. I just want you to focus on this top line. This is work done by Neff Walker at Hopkins. This is the goal that people are talking about for 2035, or 2030 as now we're thinking, and that is getting an under 5 mortality rate of around about 20 deaths per 1,000 live births. But look at where we are heading. The trajectory is terrible, because if we are looking where we are now in 2010, 4 countries have hit that 20 mark. At the present rate of progress, only 9 out of approximately 75 countries of concern are going to hit that mark, and only 15 even amongst the best performers. So grand convergence, great idea. We've got to do a lot more if we're going to really achieve it. And it's not going to be simple. Let's switch from children to mothers now. And I just want you to focus on this column. Very high maternal mortality ratios. You would think we just have to get everything we know about how to reduce maternal mortality to the mother at the point of delivery in a facility. Wrong, wrong, wrong. Because look, here you have prophylactic oxytocin, 91% coverage, but still very high maternal mortality. Therapeutic oxytocin, 85% coverage. Magnesium sulfate for eclampsia, 87%. Antibiotics, 82%. Parenteral antibiotics, 89%. But still, even when you deliver everything we know that works, it isn't enough. So there's a factor X. There's something missing in how we reduce, in this case, maternal mortality. I love numbers, and it's great that we focus on numbers, but also let's think about the qualitative dimensions to care, things that we care about in the way we deliver healthcare. Why do we not pay attention to those issues in low middle income countries? Here are 2 toilets in a health facility in Kenya. Those doors don't open. They've never opened. Would you take a shower here if you were pregnant, about to deliver your child? I don't think you would find that acceptable. We need to talk about these quality issues, and let's not forget mental health as well. We focus on things that cause death, but let's also focus on things that cause disability, and in this case, mental ill health. We have to put mental health at the center of our global health agenda, as well as some of these other issues that cause mortality. Let's also think about systems, and maybe this is the factor X, the magic thing that we're not focusing on enough. This is looking at mortality of children under 5 in Mexico from 1980 to 2005, 2006. And fantastic progress. But what drove that progress was a series of interventions over time which enabled the progress to continue unaborted. How do we build systems into our future for Global Health 2035? And I'll come to that a little bit more in a moment, elaborating on universal health coverage. And yes, we talk about determinants in the health system. We've talked about the need for the economic determinants, but let's not also forget political determinants. We did another commission, and that commission was on global governance for health. And if you look at areas that we don't traditionally think of as part of health, like the financial crises, issues around intellectual property, investment treaties, food security, migration, and even armed violence, these political determinants are going to affect whether we can achieve the goals that Dean laid out in individual countries. If you've got armed violence in your country, whether it's Mali, Central African Republic, or the DRC, it's unlikely you're going to hit those targets that Dean is talking about. Governance is critical. So let's just look at the way the world is currently. This is Stuart Patrick in Foreign Affairs earlier this year. We live in a GX world. In other words, a world governed by temporary coalitions of nations. What does that mean? It means that we're in a phase of world history where multilateralism is under challenge. At a time when there are no major collectives of governments working together truly, effectively, to deliver change. Yes, we have some associations like the G8 and the G20, but they're very exclusive groups that do not bring other countries into global governance. We have multiple power centers as a result. We have minilateralism, not multilateralism. In other words, limited ambitions and objectives for what our international system can achieve. We do have, and this is optimistic, a new regionalism, regional partnerships to deliver success, some ad hoc coalitions, more public-private arrangements, burden sharing, but too often what burden sharing means, in other words, we all share the pain, it means burden shifting. Nobody takes responsibility. In this review in Foreign Affairs earlier this year, the great rallying cry, isn't it fantastic, is we just need good enough governance to solve our problems. The message of the Oslo Commission on Global Governance is that good enough governance is not good enough. What we really need to focus on are some of these wider political determinants to deliver the objectives that Dean set out so powerfully. So what does that mean? Let's look at some of the issues we focus on today. We often talk about governments as being the instrument to effect change. Yes, but also it's the quality of our institutions in countries that we also need to focus on. We talk about fiscal space, having enough economic growth to deliver the money that we can affect change, but we also need the policy or political space where we can discuss these issues democratically, transparently, inclusively. We talk about health and human rights, but then by doing so, we talk about a dichotomy, a false dichotomy, because it should be health with human rights. We talk about advocacy. We do this all the time. Sit on the outside throwing stones at everybody on the inside. We've got to get involved ourselves, participate in these global debates. And we talk about regulation as being the way to control the process. No, it's actually about accountability, holding people accountable for their promises and commitments. And in this report, the proposal was that there should be an international monitoring panel to hold people accountable for their promises and commitments. Let's just look at universal health coverage. It's going to be tough. This is how long it took to reach universal health coverage. We can't wait 118 years, which is how long they waited in Belgium, or 127 years in Germany, or you get my point. We want to do things much quicker. 2035 is one generation away, just one generation. How are we going to accelerate this process? Also, we face a crisis, and we're part of this crisis. How are we going to train professionals, health professionals across all cadres, to fill the gap in human resources globally? We haven't got a simple solution, and Lincoln Chen and Julio Frank wrote in a commission on health professionals a couple of years ago about the slow-burning crisis emerging in health professional education. Have we done enough to solve that? No way, not nearly enough. I am optimistic, though. I'm optimistic because we have a few bright possibilities. The AIDS movement, bar any other movement in global health, has truly been the one that's transformative in terms of health, politically, economically, and socially. How do we use the lessons of the AIDS movement to really deliver the vision that we've heard this afternoon? And we have a commission that Eric's sitting on that's led by Peter Piot and Michel Sidibe, looking at how AIDS can deliver for global health. I'm also optimistic because in 2015 we're going to have two enormous political moments which we have to grasp. One political moment will take place in New York in September. That's at the UN General Assembly, where the next 15 years of development will be planned, the Sustainable Development Goals. But in Paris in December, there's another key moment, and that's when the world has to come together to commit on a process for addressing climate change. And these two processes need to come together on health and on climate change. And this is where, and Tom very nicely mentioned it earlier, and I take that as a positive comment, planetary health. Because we don't think enough about our civilizations. We're sitting in this magnificent palace of medicine here. Magnificent it is. It feels very solid, doesn't it? But if you were in the Mayan civilization in 800 AD, it would have felt pretty solid then too. 300 years later, the civilization had vanished. And that is human history. Civilizations come, civilizations go. Martin Rees isn't some maverick or crank. He is Lord Rees, our astronomer royal, a former president of the Royal Society. And this is what he said a decade ago in our final century. I think the odds are no better than 50-50 that our present civilization, that's yours and mine, will survive till the end of the present century. You may have seen this. This is Johann Rockström's planetary boundaries model. The idea that you and I live on a planet that exists within a safe operating space. Here's the safe operating space. And there are determinants of that space: climate change, ocean acidification, ozone depletion, nitrogen phosphorus cycles, freshwater use, land use, biodiversity loss, atmospheric aerosol loading, chemical pollution. And look, 3 of these have already been crossed, these safety boundaries. And once they're crossed, you can't go back. Climate change, nitrogen cycle, biodiversity loss. Once they're all crossed, that's the end of our civilization. Forget Global Health 2035. So let's start and think about what this means for the future. There's you. What we've done so far is to focus on the physical systems that determine our future. Issues like extreme weather events, water and sanitation, food security, disease, and population migration. All of these physical systems that we've talked about so far in relation to climate change are key, but that is not the big threat. The big threat is you and me. The big threat are the human systems that we've created. Our civilizations, our economic systems, our political systems, our mechanisms to preserve social stability and peace. That's the challenge of sustainability, and the solution to that is building resilient societies. We phrase that as planetary health. You can sign up to it if you want. Please do. It's the idea that we deliver on Global Health 2035 by committing ourselves to that vision for a better world within a generation, ending preventable mortality in a generation, but addressing these broader issues of the ecological crisis we face and the need to look critically at our civilization and the quality of that civilization. And it also relates to places like this, our universities. What is the kind of knowledge we're creating to solve these predicaments? This is the way we do it traditionally. There is something we call the university. We work within disciplinary boundaries. Short-term funding. Output is research papers you publish in journals like ours. We have these crazy things called journals. You write papers for other scientists, you set the agenda, and the incentives produce paralysis. This is what we want to do. We want open science. We want plural institutions in our society working together for the common endeavors and common visions we share. We want to address societal challenges, not just narrow science-driven challenges. We want to look at longer-term investment in health, not just short-term. We want to think about outputs that matter, not just research papers in journals. Forget journals. Let's think about other ways to deliver information. Let's talk to policymakers, not only ourselves. PPI means patient and public involvement. Bring in citizens to science to set the agenda and help deliver the agenda. And let's use incentives so that we can adapt, we can evolve, we can change to meet the global needs that we need to address. And finally, what about journals? We have to change too. Let's stop talking to ourselves and let's think about a different vision of a common shared humanity. I can't put it better than Amartya Sen put it in 2010 in his wonderful book, The Idea of Justice. This is what he said: an active and an energetic media can play an extremely important part in making the problems, predicaments, and humanity of certain groups more understood by others. So let's do that. Let's work in that common endeavor to deliver on the vision that Dean has set out in Global Health 2035, and that this center, this UCLA Center for World Health, will achieve within one generation. Thank you.